The wrong number. That never asked for anyone officially, she worked with voices. In reality, she worked with silence. Voices came and went on their own. Silence was what you had to listen to. The central telephone exchange of the city never slept. By day, the building hummed with talk. Operators in gray headsets sat at long boards, hands flying, plugging cables into sockets, stitching calls together across the city, across the country, sometimes across a border if the paperwork said so. By night, the noise died down, but the lines did not. They just grew sharper. Every call stood out. Every ring mattered. On paper, she was long-distance operator, level 3. Name, Maria Kostkova. Age, 39. Marital status, divorced. On the personnel file, there was a short note. Reliable, attentive, good memory for numbers. That last part was why the ministry had quietly suggested years ago that if she ever noticed unusual calling patterns on the boards, she could dial a certain extension and tell someone. Not spying, they'd said, smiling the way only men who did nothing but spy could smile. Just helping us keep the network clean. Most nights, the board was boring, static, crackles, lovers arguing across town, truck drivers calling wives from roadside booths, the occasional foreign businessman asking for a hotel. Most nights, her job was to connect and forget. The night it started, she didn't connect anyone. She connected a silence. Two kinds of wrong numbers existed. Stupid ones, drunk men, sleepy grandmothers, fingers on the wrong dial, and the other kind, precise ones, repeated ones, that always hung up at the same moment. At 01:17 on a Tuesday, Maria got the other kind. She was on the night shift, 3rd floor, board 5. The room was dim except for the glow of tiny bulbs and the green-shaded lamps. Only 3 operators were on duty. 2 were half asleep, hands moving on instinct. Maria was on her 2nd cup of bitter machine coffee, wide awake the way you got when you'd been doing this long enough to feel the currents behind the lines. The call came in on trunk 12, one of the long-distance lines that connected the city to the outside world. A tiny bulb lit. A soft buzz. She plugged in. "Central Exchange," she said, voice level. "Number, please?" Static. Then a man's voice, low, accented not like her city, not like the capital. 34121, he said. "No operator needed." That was odd. For direct dial local calls, you didn't need them at all. For certain protected numbers, ministries, foreign missions, you needed them more than anyone, to log and route and listen. "Origin?" she asked. "International transit," the man said quickly. "Pre-authorized, just connect the line." He sounded like he expected her not to ask. She glanced at the board. Trunk 12's origin tag blinked. INTL, transit node 7. The code matched. Still. 34121, she repeated, fingers poised over the patch cords. "Who are you calling?" Silence. Not the kind where someone searched for a number, the kind where someone decided whether to answer a question at all. Then, "Private subscriber," he said. "Approved. Connect, please." He could be telling the truth. He could also be lying. The file in the ministry's drawer didn't say curious, argumentative. It said attentive. She patched him through. Some roads you didn't block without reason. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, he hung up. No answer, no hello, just ringing, then silence. The bulb on trunk 12 went dark. Maria unplugged, wrote nothing in the log, and moved to the next call. She'd handled thousands of wrong numbers. Her brain classified this one as odd and filed it in the back. If it had stayed alone, she would never have thought about it again. It didn't stay alone. 2 nights later, at almost exactly the same time, 0116. Trunk 12 lit up again. Same origin code. INTL. Transit node 7. She plugged in. Central Exchange. 34121, a voice said. Not the same man. Same accent. Calm, low, as if reading something from a card. This time he didn't argue about operators. This time he sounded like a man ordering more bread from a bakery. She patched the line. The target number, 34121, rang. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th, the caller hung up. No one picked up. Maria stared at the small bulb as it went dark. Her fingers hovered over the logbook. Most calls were written down as a matter of procedure: origin, destination, duration. Transit calls, especially international, got extra ink. Tonight, she didn't write anything. Instead, on the edge of her scrap pad, she wrote 34121, 01.17, T12, ring 4, cut. She underlined it once, not because it meant anything yet, because if there was a pattern, she didn't want to trust it to memory alone. The third time it wasn't trunk 12, it was trunk 9. Same origin code, same time give or take 2 minutes. Different voice, same number. 34121, please. This time she didn't ask who they were calling. She didn't ask anything. She patched. 1 ring, 2, 3, cut. The board hummed around her, a wall of small private dramas. A woman crying softly in one ear, a man laughing too loud in another, and somewhere under it, a quiet metronome at 34121, ringing into an indifferent void. She flipped open the internal directory, the heavy book of numbers and names that told operators which subscribers mattered more than others. Government offices, factories, party headquarters, foreign missions. She ran her finger down the 3-4 pages. 34121 was not listed, not as a ministry, not as a party secretary, not as anything more than private line, District 3, no name. Some lines had that: new installs, unclaimed listings, numbers reserved for later. They were supposed to be quiet, unused. This one was anything but. She added another line to her scrap pad: 34121, 01.15, T9, ring 4, cut. Her pencil tapped the paper. Once, twice, 4 times. Patterns made her feel safe. Schedules, shift rotations, paydays. In a city where big decisions lived far above her, patterns were the one thing she could shape with her own hands. The smooth, predictable dance of calls, routed and finished. This pattern did not feel safe. It felt like someone had discovered that the central telephone exchange had a new use. Not for talking, for not talking. The next night, nothing happened. No international trunks at 1 a.m., no quiet voices, no ringing ghosts. By midnight on the night after that, she had almost convinced herself it had been coincidence. Then trunk 7 lit up. Not at 1:17, at 1 exactly. The bulb glowed a steady, patient orange. She plugged in. Central Exchange. Direct to 34121, please, the voice said. This one was older, rougher. Same accent. Not quite theirs. Not quite foreign. That in-between sound that belonged to people who traveled too much. She watched the board as she patched him. This time she counted out loud in her head as it rang. 1, 2, 3, cut. Her hand was already moving toward the small black metal phone mounted on the wall behind her, the one with no number on the dial, the one that went up, 2 floors and 1 building over, to an office whose name was not printed anywhere in the exchange directory. She stopped herself. Not yet. 1 wrong number was nothing. 3 was a coincidence. 4, spread across different trunks, at the same time of night, to a silent private line that no one answered. 4 was the beginning of something. But the ministry men had said, years ago, "Don't call us every time some drunk dials the wrong girlfriend." We need patterns, not noise. She needed to be sure this was noise of the right kind. So she did what she was good at. She listened. Calling patterns were like handwriting. You learned to read them without thinking. Factories called it shift changes. Hospitals called it odd hours with alarms in their voices. Foreign missions called in small, dense bursts around lunch and late at night when time zones met awkwardly. The 34121 calls didn't fit any of that. In 1 week, she logged 7 of them on her scrap pad. All in the early hours between 1 and 1:30. All from international transit trunks with the same origin code. All from different voices, some young, some old, some clipped, some slow. They all did the same thing. Ask for 34121. Let it ring 4 times. Hang up. Nobody ever asked the operator if the call had gone through. Nobody ever said, "They didn't answer. Try again." It was as if the ringing itself was the point, or the log entries, except there were no log entries. Transit trunks, in theory, were recorded automatically elsewhere, in gray rooms full of high-speed tape. At her board, she only wrote down calls when they were unusual. She looked at her scrap pad one night and saw how much of her pencil lead had already gone into something unusual that no one but her knew about. She tapped the pad with her knuckle. 1, 2, 3, 4, like rings, like steps toward a decision. On Thursday, she had her chance to test it. At 1:08, trunk 11 lit up. "Central Exchange." "We need 34121, said a soft, careful voice. This one, she was sure, belonged to a man younger than 30. She could hear the discomfort in the way he said the number, as if reading something he didn't like the taste of. "Line is out," Maria said. The words surprised even her. She rarely lied on the board. Lies created chaos. Chaos created angry calls, complaints, desk visits. But tonight, the lie came smooth. Something in her wanted to poke this pattern, see if it bled. There was a pause. "Out?" the young man repeated. "Yes," she said. "Technical maintenance. We can try again later. Do you want another number?" Silence. Then, very quietly, "No, that's all. Thank you." He hung up. No request to be connected to a supervisor. No, check again. No attempt to ask what kind of technical maintenance affected exactly one anonymous private line at 1 in the morning. He just folded, like someone who'd been told the store was closed. Maria unplugged, heartbeat louder than the soft hum of the exchange. Either the entire network they were building rested on never arguing with operators, or the rung itself, the attempt, was the message. If the number was out, maybe that meant something in a code book she'd never see. Maybe tonight, somewhere, someone would not do something because the line had been out when they tried. She had no way of knowing. She had just sent a tiny, wordless jolt down a wire into a world that didn't know her name. That thought settled in her stomach like cold tea. She picked up the black metal phone on the wall. Her finger hovered over the hook. Then she put it down again. Not yet. One more night, she thought. One more. She didn't get one more night. She got a different kind of call instead. At 03:02, when the world outside was deepest asleep and the exchange was at its quietest, a red light flicked on at the top of her board. Not a trunk, not a local line. The red lamp belonged to an internal extension reserved for emergencies. Fire, police, ministry. She plugged in. "Kostkova," she said automatically, giving her name. "Stay on the board," a flat voice said. "Do not leave your position. Do not discuss this with your colleagues. We're coming up." The line clicked dead. She sat there, breath suddenly shallow, the headset cord suddenly feeling too tight around her neck. On the boards around her, the other operators blinked, looked at her, then at the red light as it went dark. "You all right, Maria?" one of them asked. Fine, she said. System test. Her mouth had found the lie again, easier this time. 3 minutes later, the glass door at the back of the room opened. 2 men walked in. They weren't wearing uniforms. They weren't carrying tools. They had the stillness of people who didn't need to raise their voices to be obeyed. One of them wore a dark suit and a city-issue overcoat. The other wore a technician's khaki jacket with no name tag. The suit walked straight to her station. "Comrade Kostkova?" he asked softly. His voice was the same as the one on the red line, clipped, economical. She nodded. Yes. He held up a slim leather wallet, opened it just enough for her to glimpse an emblem she had only seen once before in a training lecture about cooperation with competent organs. "Our office would like to clarify a few details about some calls you've handled this week," he said, "particularly those to a certain number in District 3. 34121 thudded in her chest like an extra heartbeat. "I log all my calls in the main register," she said automatically. "Yes," he said, "but we know you keep a more attentive record as well." He looked at the scrap pad by her elbow. The technician in khaki unplugged her headset from the board with a small, practiced movement and repatched the cables so that another operator could cover her slots. Maria stood up slowly. Her legs tingled. "Please bring your personal notes," the suited man said. "And don't worry, comrade. This is not about your mistakes." He smiled then, not kindly, not cruelly, just like a man who had been awake longer than anyone else in the building. "It's about someone else's." They led her out of the exchange room, past the humming racks of equipment, up one floor to a door with no label. The scrap pad in her hand felt heavier than its pages. She had wanted patterns. Now the pattern had noticed her back. On the other side of the door, in a room with no windows and a single green lamp, very much like her own, people who listened to different kinds of silence were waiting. And somewhere, in District 3, in an apartment with a phone that never answered at night, a number she had never dialed herself waited to be written down in a very different ledger. The number that wasn't supposed to mean anything. The room behind the unlabeled door was the first place in the exchange where Maria could not hear the city breathing. No ringing, no relays, no murmur in her headset, just the faint tick of a wall clock and the whisper of a folder opening. They sat her at a plain table under a single lamp. The man in the dark suit put her scrap pad down between them as carefully as if it were evidence from a crime scene. The technician in the khaki jacket stayed by the door, hands behind his back, looking like he'd been told to watch the wall and not move. The suited man spoke first. "Kostkova, Maria," he said, as if reading a label on a drawer. "Long-distance operator, level 3. Good record, good punctuality, better memory than most." He lifted his eyes. "My name is Carol. Internal control." He didn't show a badge long enough for her to read it. He didn't need to. On the table, his finger tapped once on the pad, on the first line where she'd written her private notes, 341210117, T12, ring 4, cut. "You started this list yourself," he said. "No one ordered you to. Why?" Maria felt her own pulse in her throat. She hadn't had time for water. The taste of machine coffee clung to her tongue. "Because they were wrong calls," she said. "Wrong how?" They reached the number they asked for. "Wrong in their behavior," she said slowly. "Different voices, same origin code, same time of night, always the same number. They let it ring exactly 4 times. They never wait for a person. They never complain. They hang up like the ringing itself was all they needed." Carl watched her over the rim of his glasses. "And then?" "Then they did it again," she said. "And again, on different trunks. That's not a man trying to catch his sister at home. That's Something else. He turned a page in the folder by his elbow. "The night you told one of them the line was out," he said. "What did you want?" Maria hesitated. "To see if he behaved like a person," she said at last, "or like a mechanism. If he really needed to talk, he would have complained, asked for another number. He didn't. He just accepted out like a signal." Carol nodded once. "Good," he said. "That's roughly what we thought, too. It's pleasant when reality agrees with the paperwork." He flipped the folder and turned it so the photograph clipped inside faced her. An elderly man looked back at her from the gray paper. Neatly combed hair gone mostly white, heavy brows, the kind of bony nose you saw on trams and in bread queues every day. Underneath, typed lines: Dvorak, Joseph, 68, retired radio mechanic, District 3. "Subscriber to 34121, Carol said. "Lives alone, no children in the city. War veteran, Eastern Front. Never loud, never important. A good man for a number that should mean nothing." Maria's eyes went from the photograph to the scrap pad and back. "He's the one they're calling?" she asked. "Yes and no," Carol said. "His line is the one that rings. That doesn't mean he's the one they want to hear." "They don't want to hear anyone," she said quietly. "They hang up before they can." "Exactly," Carol replied. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "For months," he said, "we've had machines on certain international trunks. The machines are very proud of themselves. They draw us beautiful graphs and record every second. They told us there were many short night calls from one foreign transit node to a handful of private lines in our city, including 34121. But the machines couldn't tell us what the calls felt like, whether there were human hands at the end or just patterns. That's why we spoke to you." He tapped her notes. "You gave us the missing parts, the 4 rings. The fact that no one ever asked, 'Did it go through?' That no one ever sounded disappointed. That one night, when you said 'out,' the caller folded like a piece of paper." He held her gaze. "That tells us these are not conversations," he said. "They are instructions, or confirmations, or both." A quiet settled over the table for a moment. Maria could hear the clock on the wall behind her counting out the seconds. "Is he one of them?" she asked, nodding at the photograph. Carol's mouth twitched in something that wasn't quite a smile. "In our experience," he said, "old men in small flats are either exactly what they seem or very much not. We don't know yet which kind he is. That's why, for now, we are not arresting him. We are listening." The technician by the door shifted his weight. Carol glanced at him, then back at Maria. "You are not under suspicion," he said. "You noticed something we told you, years ago, to look for. You picked up the red phone at the right time. You did what you were supposed to do. Now we are going to be impolite and ask you to do more." "What more?" "Nothing very dramatic," he said. "Keep doing your job. Keep logging these calls like you have been. Time, trunk, how long they let it ring, what the voices sound like. At the end of each shift, you will give that to one of our people. You won't discuss it with your colleagues, and you won't improvise any more line-out experiments without asking." He closed the folder. "One more thing," he added lightly, as if it were an afterthought. "The night you said out, our people had a car under his window. That morning, for the first time in weeks, he did not leave the house for his usual bread and newspaper. He sat at his kitchen table for 2 hours instead. The next day, when the calls resumed, his routine resumed." "You see what that means, yes?" Maria felt a cold line trace down her spine. "It means," Carol said softly, "that with 3 words at a switchboard, you moved a piece on a board you couldn't see. Try not to move any more without us, Comrade Kostkova." Back at the board, everything tried to look ordinary. Bulbs lit, cords moved, lives intersected in the wires for a few minutes at a time. If someone looked over her shoulder, they would have seen nothing special. A woman in a headset, writing neatly in the register. Only her scrap pad changed. Under the regular scribbles, factory to depot, hospital to ministry, there was now a smaller, tighter column. 341210106. T8, ring 4, male, low, foreign. 3412101.19. T11, ring 4, female, clipped, tired. Some nights there were no entries at all. Some nights, 3 lines in 15 minutes. Always between 1 and half past. Always 4 rings. Always from the same foreign transit node. The voices changed. The pattern didn't. She began to recognize the callers without seeing their faces. The young one who sounded like he wanted to be anywhere else. The older one who spoke the number as if it were a ritual. The woman who breathed too close to the mouthpiece. None of them ever asked who she was. None of them asked about the weather in her city, or whether the line was clear. They might as well have been dictating numbers to a machine. 2 weeks later, Carol invited her to see where the rings went. He didn't call it that. He just appeared at the end of her shift, in the lobby, coat collar up, hat in his hand. "Do you have bread to stand in line for?" he asked dryly. "Not today," she said. "Good," he replied. "Then walk with me." They left the exchange and stepped into a pale winter afternoon. The air smelled of coal and exhaust, the usual soup of the city. They walked 3 blocks in silence. Maria recognized none of the streets. She rarely came this way except in trams. Carol stopped at the corner of a narrow row of older buildings, all peeling paint and tired windows. "Number 14, he said, nodding across the street. The house was like 100 others. Ground-floor workshops, 3 floors of flats above, a small archway leading to an inner courtyard. "3rd floor, Carol added. "2nd window from the left. That's where 34121 lives." As if on cue, a lace curtain stirred slightly. "Dvořák," Maria said. "Dvořák," Carol agreed. A gray van was parked a little down the street, its back doors closed, cables sneaking from underneath toward a cellar window. "The van is ours," he said. "The telephone line doesn't just come up to his kitchen anymore. It takes a little detour." "You hear what he hears?" Maria said quietly. "We hear when he hears," Carol corrected her. "So far, that's 4 rings and nothing. But we also watch what he does with the silence afterwards." "And what does he do?" "For an old man," Carol said, "he is very punctual. On nights with no calls, he sleeps. On nights with calls, twice now, he got up, put trousers on over his pajamas, sat at the kitchen table and did nothing for an hour. No radio, no light except a lamp. Then he went back to bed." "Maybe he just can't sleep," Maria offered weakly. "Maybe," Carol said. "Or maybe he has been told, when the foreign phone rings 4 times, sit and wait, in case there is a second signal. People who have lived through 2 regimes are very obedient to rules nobody else can see." He nodded toward the building. "Our people follow him when he leaves," he said. "Mostly he is exactly what his file claims. Bread at 8, newspaper at 9, radios in the basement until lunch. Afternoons in the park if his knees allow. He complains about his pension to the grocer like everyone else, but some days when your scrap pad has a line on it, his routine bends." "Bends how?" Carol didn't answer immediately. He took a cigarette from a pack, turned it between his fingers, then put it back without lighting it. "After 2 calls in 1 week," he said, "he did not go to the park. He took a tram to the freight yards, sat in a shabby cafe for an hour. 2 men joined him separately. They drank coffee, talked about sickness and football. One works in customs, one sweeps offices in a ministry. We know that because our people pulled their employment records before they finished their cups." Maria watched the 3rd-floor window. It looked like any other. A plant on the sill, a mug, a shadow moving past. The next week, Carol went on, after another 1 a.m. ringing, he walked to the river, sat on a bench for 20 minutes. Nobody approached him. 10 minutes after he left, a boy on a bicycle stopped, reached under the bench, and rode away with something taped underneath. We visited the boy's home. In a box under his bed, we found a strip of microfilm. He cried very hard and said an uncle told him he could earn money by bringing old papers. The uncle does not exist in any registry yet. The picture assembled itself in Maria's head, piece by piece. Foreign node, 4 rings, old man at a table, coffee in a freight yard, boy with a bicycle, film in a box. All hung on 5 digits that, on paper, were supposed to belong to a sleeping pensioner. "I thought the war ended a long time ago," she said. Carol snorted softly. "For men who like secrets," he said, "wars are like radio stations. They just change frequency." He straightened, letting his coat fall closed. "We are almost done with this one," he said. "We have names now, meetings, routes. The last thing we need is certainty. Your board will give us that. And then, one night, 34121 will ring for the last time." The last time came quicker than she expected. It was a Tuesday, clear and cold. The early part of her shift passed in the usual blur of doctors, depots, tired mothers. At 0058, trunk 9 lit up. "Central Exchange," she said. "International Transit, connect 34121, a man's voice said. She had not heard him before. He sounded tired in the way of people who have been waiting too long for things to be ready. She patched the line. She didn't need her book any more to count. 1 ring, 2, 3, 4, click. She added a neat line to her pad. 1 now, T9, male, rough, foreign, 4 rings. At 1:03, the red lamp above her board flashed. She plugged in with fingers that suddenly felt clumsy. "Kostkova. Don't touch 34121 for the next 10 minutes, Carol's voice said, calm but tighter than in his office. "No matter who calls, no connection. Understood?" "Understood," she said. "Good. Stay on your board. Do your normal work. Nothing is happening." The line went dead. If she hadn't known his tone, she might have believed him. She imagined, without wanting to, the van under the building, headphones on ears, men watching a door on the 3rd floor. She imagined a key turning, not quietly. At 1:07, trunk 14 lit. Another international. "Central Exchange," she said, keeping her voice level. "Connect us to 34121, please," a woman's voice said, quick and thin. For a fraction of a second, Maria almost moved on reflex. Years of habit wanted to reach for the plug. Instead, she heard Carol's voice in her ear again. "Don't touch." "I'm sorry," she said. "That line is temporarily out of service." There was a silence that wasn't just lines. "Out?" the woman repeated, not to Maria so much as to herself. "Yes," Maria said. "Technical work. Try again tomorrow." "There might not be a tomorrow," the woman whispered, too soft for anyone but the operator to catch. Then the line went dead. Maria stared at the dark bulb. Outside, somewhere across the city, a 3rd-floor phone in District 3 was not ringing. Something else was happening instead. No one came for her that night. She finished her shift, handed in the official register, slid the scrap pad into her locker, and walked home through streets that looked exactly as they had the day before. 2 days later, between calls about delayed deliveries and a child who had dialed the wrong grandmother, Carol appeared at the back of the room. He didn't ask her to leave the board. He stood where a supervisor might stand, reached down, and rearranged a cable as if to justify his presence. "The number you've been watching," he said quietly. "It won't trouble you any more." Disconnected? She asked. He nodded. Pulled it with my own hands in the basement yesterday, he said. The wires are in a box now, labeled for scrap. If someone dials 34121, they'll get a flat tone and no story. And Dvořák? For the first time since she'd met him, Carol looked away before answering. In the report, he said slowly, it will say, coerced asset, recruited years earlier using family connections abroad, used primarily as a passive relay. Neutralized. Neutralized, she repeated. The word tasted worse than the coffee. When we came in, Carol went on, voice low enough that no other operator could hear, he was sitting at the kitchen table in his trousers over his pajamas, as expected. Phone in reach, notebook on the table. He looked at us, looked at the phone, and said, I never left my post during the war. Why should I stand up now? Then he asked for his heart drops. He knew exactly who we were. Men like him always do. He cleared his throat. He will not be fixing radios anymore, Carol finished. Let's leave it at that. Maria swallowed. Did we stop something? She asked. Her eyes stayed on the board. Her fingers moved on automatic, plugging a call from a factory to a depot. We stopped this channel, Carol said. We caught some of the people who followed it. A customs clerk who liked coffee too much. A boy's uncle who vanished the night before we arrived. A man in an office who thought he could play both sides. Others have run. Others will try again somewhere else, with a different number, a different old man. That is how this work is. He straightened. You did what you were asked, he said, and you did it well. That doesn't mean you have to feel good about it. He gave the cable at her board one last unnecessary nudge and walked away, becoming just another coat in the corridor. For weeks after, Maria's hands still twitched at 1 in the morning. Her eyes flicked to trunks, 7, 9, 12 out of habit. Nothing special happened. The international lines still carried businessmen and relatives and the occasional wrong foreign number that wanted a hotel instead of an old aunt. But the particular silence that had belonged to 34121 was gone. The directory in front of her changed too. Where Private Line District 3 once sat, someone had typed vacant. 5 digits on paper, freed for some future subscriber who would never know their number had already lived one life. Time moved. New exchanges were built. More and more calls went through without human operators at all. Machines took over the direct lines. Young technicians in clean shirts talked about automatic switching and digital future. Maria stayed long enough to train girls who had never touched a real plug board. To them, stories about patch cords and night trunks sounded like tales from the war, even if they had happened only 10, 15 years earlier. On her last day, when her hands had begun to ache in damp weather and the doctor used the word retirement more often than she liked, she cleaned out her locker. Spare headset pads, 2 old pens, a postcard from a niece. At the bottom, yellowed and curled at the edges, was the scrap pad. The first page still bore her careful columns 341210117 T12 ring 4 3412101.19 T11 ring 4. 7 lines at the top, then pages of other numbers, other patterns she had never had time to show anyone. She tore out the first page, folded it once, then again, and slipped it into the pocket of her coat. Not as a medal. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd held a flashlight in a dark corridor while other people did what they always did behind the doors. But the numbers mattered to her. They were proof that for a few winter weeks the silences on her board had been as important as the words. Officially, she had been paid to connect voices. In reality, the thing that changed the world that year was the call that never reached anyone at all. 5 digits in District 3, 4 rings in the middle of the night, and the decision of one woman at a switchboard to write them down instead of looking away.